Welcome to another amazing episode of the Engaging Virtual Meetings podcast. I'm John Chen, your host, and recently deemed CSP. That stands for Certified Speaking Professional. I just came from the Influence Conference this year, and let me tell you, it was a career highlight. One of the sneak things, if you look at my social media, you'll see that I was apparently the first CSP to do the worm on stage in front of 800 of my peers to get this award. Meanwhile, if you're watching on social media, make sure and hit the subscribe, share, like, or comment. Let us know if you're out here, if you're watching live. Occasionally, I will put your comment inside of the program. If you want all the episodes of the Engaging Virtual Meetings podcast, we have over 150 episodes now. You go to engagingvirtualmeetings.online, and on October 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, you can get a free ticket for day one, but you really got to look at this virtual VIP, or for the first time ever, you could come in person, see 3 Hall of Fame speakers, and come see how we produce the most engaging hybrid there is. Lots of value either way. So you can go to engagingvirtualmeetings.com/CON for conference. Now, I've got this amazing guest coming up. She's an author, speaker, executive coach focusing on self-advocacy, innovation, and burnout management. In 2023, she wrote a book called Be Your Own Cheerleader. She's one of our Asian Pacific Islander friends because she focuses on self-advocacy for Asian and South Asians in the workplace. Let's welcome Neelu Kaur. There you go. Hi, Neelu. How you doing?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you. I'm excited to have you on here. Oh my gosh. Okay, so tell me something good in your life that happened in the last, month or so?
Something good I can talk about yesterday. I had a virtual keynote and it was fantastic, very highly engaged and great feedback. So I'm really excited about that.
Well, good. We're going to talk about those kind of things too, because I really want to know, some people think that virtual is dying, but the virtual is still around here. But let's start off on the easy part here. Neelu, do us a favor for my friends who don't know you like I know you. Will you please introduce yourself, who you are, and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm Neelu Kaur. I am an author and speaker, and I'm based in New York City. And as John mentioned, my focus is on self-advocacy. I'm broadening the scope a little bit, but what I've noticed is that self-advocacy is something that it's not just in an area where Asians and South Asians need assistance. It's a lot of people struggle with self-advocacy. So that's been my focus for the last couple of years, specifically on self-advocacy.
Now, a lot of people use self-care as the word, and I think I hear you purposely using the word self-advocacy. Why do you use that word versus any of the other words?
I think self-advocacy is a form of self-care, actually. And I think we have to advocate for our needs, what we want, what we think we deserve in work and at home. And so I think self-advocacy is something that we all struggle with, and that's purposefully used. That word is purposely used.
Let's talk a little bit about how did you get started in this? Was there something you were doing before you wrote this amazing book, Be Your Own Cheerleader?
Yes, I was a speaker. I was out in the world speaking about burnout management, innovation, all of those things. And I think what led me to Be Your Own Cheerleader was my own experiences of consistently being downsized and not understanding why. So my last downsizing was in 2013. And at that point, I was like, this is not happening anymore. And so I took it in my own hands. And I then developed sort of this framework because I realized it wasn't just me that struggled. As I coached and trained thousands of professionals, I realized there's a common red thread among certain cultures of why self-advocacy is so challenging. And so I set off to research, to interview, to coach, and that's how my book came about.
So you focus on Asian and South Asians, and again, I've been doing a lot of advocacy work. I was able to create API NSA for the first time last year. It only took 50 years, Neelu. But it was exciting because here at Influence, they now have the API Plus NSA badge, or rather you can add to your name badge to identify with that, and it's still really a hallmark moment. What do you think are the unique challenges, right, in the self-advocacy, especially in the Asian and South Asian cultures?
One of the reasons that it's so challenging is because of this concept, cultural dimension called individualism versus collectivism.
Mm.
So all Asian countries come from a very collective, we-based culture where it's not just about you, it's about your nuclear family and extended family, and it's all about group harmony versus North America and corporate America specifically is so much focused on the individual, me, my, what I did, how, and there's a conflict. And I think when we are taught, whether we are raised by people that come from collective cultures or we ourselves are from collective cultures, we struggle with speaking up, sharing our thoughts, our ideas. We were taught that keep your head down, do good work, and your work will speak for itself. And that's a recipe for disaster in corporate America.
Do you have any examples or stories of either the disaster or rescuing somebody from like that corporate disaster?
I think one of the things I've struggled with, and I sometimes still struggle with it, it's like the loudest voice in the room always gets heard. So it's like, how do you interject? How do
Yeah.
you make sure you get credit for your ideas? And so when I was an employee many, many years ago, it's something it was consistently an issue. And now, as someone who's out on my own since 2013, I realize that it's not just me that struggles with this. A lot of people struggle with this. The loudest voice always gets heard. And specifically with Asians and South Asians, it's also an issue of respect. We are taught to there's a higher power distance in Asian cultures, and so
Oh,
there's more
really?
hierarchy and more acceptance of hierarchy, authority, and power. Whereas in North America, there's a lower power distance, and I think that's also another issue why it's so challenging for Asians and South Asians to self-advocate.
That's a cool term. You really should grab onto that. I have not heard anybody talk about a higher power distance, but I really feel like that describes many people's challenge. They don't feel like they can say something or something, and I feel like in my lifetime, I spent a lifetime like breaking stereotypes. And half of that stereotype is that's occasionally it's me being the loudest person in the room. Sometimes I got to tone it down even in Western or American or whatever you want to call it culture. Uh, but still, why? Again, that's a tactic that people have been using for years. They should be able to uh, use it as one of many things. It shouldn't be the only thing, by the way, too. I think that's when people get tired or don't end up not liking right somebody inside of that corporate part is because you use one tactic over and over and it just gets tiring. Uh,
Right.
yeah. All right. Well, speaking of tactics, I really want to talk about your keynote. So let's talk about your virtual keynote. And you said it was highly engaging. People, there are still even at NSA, people still complain about black cameras, people not chatting. I just came from an academia area. The students won't interact at all, and I just really want to hear. What happened? Some examples of things that happens in your last keynote, and then what are you doing on your side to help open up that arena in virtual.
Yeah, I would love to travel back to 2020. And that was when I realized, because I was an in-person speaker, in-person facilitator, and I said, oh no, what am I going to do now? And I think your story is very similar, where it
Yeah.
was like, okay, you have to pivot. And so I actually had the pleasure to go to the Scaling Intimacy, the School of Experience Design, and Jenny Sauer Klein is the founder of it. And what I learned there through the past, 4 years I was involved there, and I'm still part of the community, we learn principles of how to engage to create psychological safety. So if you think of a ladder and there's rungs in a ladder, if you miss a rung and you ask your people to do something that's really uncomfortable too quick and you haven't built trust, it's not going to work. And in fact, it's going to make people drop off. So yes, exactly. So you want to make sure that you build trust before you ask anyone to do anything that's vulnerable or uncomfortable or what they might perceive as vulnerable or uncomfortable. So I would say that's definitely on the workshop and sort of skill building side. So you want to make sure that you do this before you put them into breakouts and things like that. On the virtual keynote side, I would say engage often for me through chat and just having engagement through chat. And so I work a little differently, whether it's a keynote, obviously, than a workshop when you're putting people in breakouts. But the fundamental truth is you don't want to ask your people, the attendees, to do anything that's uncomfortable too quickly. Like you want to make sure you as a speaker have built rapport and built trust.
I think this is so key because people have asked me all the time too, what's your favorite icebreaker? In the end, it's not crafty or tricky. In fact, the crafty and tricky as the very first quote unquote icebreaker, or we call them openers actually, is that you ask something simple, which is like, where are you calling in from? And the reason for that behind it is not that because that it's that you want to know. But it's nice to know is that it's so easy. People already do it, and if you get them to do one piece of interaction, then they're more likely to do the second piece of interaction. And I've actually tested this. Like if you ask too deep a question, or even if it's too like if it's more difficult than where you're calling in from, like you actually have to put some thought into it. Like what are you feeling today? Then people sometimes aren't ready for that or they don't reply. And as soon as they don't reply, they will not reply to the second question. And it like cascades like that. So I really agree with the techniques around that. So I'm kind of curious, like, how do you gear, or what are some of the things that you do in a keynote that get you, like, again, we have 60 minutes sometimes to change people's lives, and that's a tall order, and to get them to interact though, or maybe go one step deeper. I mean, that's in your self-advocacy work. I think part of that is getting it so people feel safe to talk about something that's true to them, but is still slightly vulnerable. What are some of the techniques that you use to get that by the end of your program?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's coming up for me as you're talking is just break the rules. I mean, we are all
Ooh.
taught to
Mm.
do certain things as keynoters, as facilitators, and it's always about your audience. So if you feel like the energy is not there, you have to do things. It's not about you, it's about your audience.
Yes.
So some of the things, so I'm sorry, what was one of your questions that you asked?
Oh, it's just like what's it like? Like you're planning the keynote or the breakout. What are some of the things that you plan along the way? So, for instance, for me, syntax is so important. Like you can't ask that deep question at the beginning. Like, but if you stage it in the middle or the end because you did some other things, the odds of it
Right.
being successful go up. Go up.
Right. That's exactly, what we learned in School of Experience Design is these
Uh,
ladders and rungs and psychological safety. And if we look at it from an adult learning perspective, that's also the case is that, the information that's the most stickiest is what we experience. And so I think when we think of
mm.
skill building, we want to make sure that there's some experience involved. And when we're keynoting, even if they're not going into breakouts, there's some sort of experience that they're walking away with. They're feeling something before that 45 minutes, before the Q&A session.
Yeah. All right. Without sharing any names, do you have like what's your favorite story from keynoting that may have happened in an audience? Here, I'll give some. I'm trying to think what an example is. Oh, my favorite was that we were in a program and somebody came back and we were having a conversation during the break. And everyone was actually talking about psychological safety. And what was so funny is that this woman broke in and she goes, I have to ask, what you all people are all talking about psychological safety. What is this? And it's kind of this recursive question, which is like she had to feel safe enough to ask this question about psychological safety that she didn't understand, which actually turned out to be a great representation of psychological safety. So that's an example of something that happened during one of our meetings. What's something that happened with you, maybe during one of your keynotes or one of your breakouts?
I think what's interesting is, piggybacking off your example, it's like you've spent all of this time talking about something, and then someone comes to you and say, well, how do I do it? Right.
Oh,
So it's almost like,
yeah.
okay, so that's on me. I must have not communicated, or again, our brains are constantly wandering. So someone who might be physically in the room or in the breakout room or in the main room in Zoom. Exactly. So we want to make sure, again, we're engaging often. And to keep people's attention, we have to do that very frequently.
Hmm. So what do you love about virtual? What do you love about virtual speaking? I want to know.
Yeah, I mean, I do. There's times when I think that I miss in person, and then there's times when I'm in person after I've traveled and gone through airports and hotels, and then I'm like, okay, because yesterday's virtual keynote was at home, and I was able to do a whole bunch of stuff afterwards. So I think there are some benefits to that. Also, if you think about globally, when you are doing a speech or a talk or a workshop, and there's people all over the world, I think it's much easier to do that virtually. So you just have broader scope. So I love that. And I
Yeah.
think messaging, especially as an author, you want to get your message out there. So I think larger audiences, it's much easier to do that virtually.
So I've been producing a lot of hybrid, and in our last program that was about a month ago in Cleveland, 15% of the audience got hit, I think, by things related to whatever was it, CrowdStrike or whatever it was, and airlines and the
Yeah.
fallout from that. And so, but they weren't disappointed. You know, they turned away from the airport and knew they had a hybrid option, and all of them logged in. So we had a much larger virtual audience. So we ran hybrid. I'm just curious for you, have you done a lot of speaking in hybrid? And if so, do you have some best techniques for hybrid?
Hybrid. Are you familiar with Priya Parker's work, The Art of Gathering?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yes.
I love
Love it.
I love her book. I love all
Yeah,
of her work.
yeah.
I think she talks about this specifically. It's like treat your hybrid as a separate meeting altogether. So making sure there's tech support, making sure everyone who's in the room feels engaged. So that's one meeting if you think of it that way. Your virtual folks is another meeting. And then you can think of it as sort of like this third energy of this collective meeting, but that you are really taking care of the virtual folks so they don't feel like they're missing out or they feel like they can't engage in the same way. So you want to make sure you have the tech support to help you do that.
Yeah, my quote for that is that often virtual attendees in a hybrid feel like second class citizens,
Yes.
right? They feel ignored. People, like, if there's no monitor for the chat. And so I've done a lot of work in hybrid MC to be the virtual MC in a large hybrid, and sometimes taking care of up to 650 people. And it's just such a massive difference. You'll love this fact too, Neelu. I found a piece of research that said if you are able to build a connection with your audience, they're 2 times as more likely to forgive you for a mistake later. And right, we all know in hybrid, right? There's just more technology, right? I showed somebody else's like my setup, right? This is like there's more technology. There's so much more stuff to go wrong that you can't go through it. And so getting that forgiveness is something I think that's really important. I don't know if you've seen that in hybrid or not.
I also think as you know, as a speaker, you use yourself as an instrument in that the other day, 2 days ago, I was in a in-person, it was a workshop actually, and there were about 60 people in the room, and they did not have as many virtual participants.
Yeah.
So there were only about 3 or 4 participants, and they kept dropping off. So I had to make sure that the one person that was remained virtually, I went and did, like I left the front as people were working to then go work with the person who
Oh,
was virtual. Because again, the onus is on you to make sure everyone feels included. And I think that's something that is much easier to do if you've already thought through all of the steps for the virtual folks in a hybrid situation.
yeah, and it has both problems in hybrid, which is one virtual attendee and 1,000 virtual attendees,
Right.
right? They're two different kind of problems, but you kind of, if you don't know, like you have an open enrollment program, you don't know which one you're going to get, so you just need to be able to handle both.
Right.
Uh, okay, let's see. So you're an attendee in somebody else's virtual meeting. Neelu, what has to happen for Neelu to be engaged inside of somebody else's virtual or hybrid program?
So this happened Monday. It's so funny. This week I have all of these experiences, which is
I love
great.
it. This is a
Yeah,
full
which is
week.
great to draw upon. I was an attendee. It was a workshop, webinar type of info sharing experience. And I felt myself viscerally getting very uncomfortable and wanting to drop off because many of the presenters, it was a many presenters in this sort of webinar, and they were just reading off of their slides. And I thought to myself, I can read. We all can read. And I think we know this. And for some reason, slides become a safety net. And some of these presenters were literally reading bullets off of their slides, not to mention all of the text on the slides. And I've been doing this long enough to know that is such a no-no. And I know you've been doing this long enough to know that is not the way you build engagement. That's not the way you build rapport. And I just found myself the information I wanted to get, so I stayed on, but I felt a little bit resentful when I dropped off because I was like, that was not the best use of my time. I needed to be there to gain this knowledge and information,
Yeah.
but it was definitely presented in not the best way. And I understand the presenters are not full-time speakers, but it was just this idea that they only thought about themselves as they were creating those slides. They did not think about how the audience would receive those slides and all of that text on the slides.
Well, what's the only benefit for that is that you now have another potential candidate member for an NSA chapter somewhere.
Exactly, exactly. Or
Oh,
all of them, because they all were doing that. And I said,
oh,
how is that every single presenter is doing
oh,
this?
okay, yeah. So tip number one, don't read your slides for crying out loud. If you need to read your slides, geez, give yourself a teleprompter and be a president a candidate or something and just read the prompter.
Right.
That does remind me though, you'll love this. Neelu, have you ever heard of anything called PowerPoint karaoke?
No.
PowerPoint karaoke is where it's a fun competition where you have to present a slide deck you have never seen before as if it was your own. And one of the slide decks I have is on presentation, and it says on there as one of the tips, don't read the slides. And the person who was presenting these slides was reading the slides word for word. And so they had to end up saying the words out loud and don't read your slides aloud. And everyone could see the words. It was one of the funniest things I've ever
Oh,
seen.
that's interesting. We've done something similar like that at the NSA NYC chapter, but it was not decks, it was images from slides, and you just go
Ooh.
up and you draw your name out and then you go up and you present. But I like the deck one too. That's funny.
Oh yes, yeah, right. It could, yeah, I have like 20 decks. So you pick a number, you get one of these random decks, and you have no idea what's going to be in it. And it is, I got to tell you, it's hilarious. And some people are really scared in it, skilled in it. When you see somebody who's got great improv skills, those are people that they can present virtually anything. They can present the telephone book, and it would
Yeah,
be funny and engaging and exciting, right?
absolutely.
Oh my goodness. How long you been a member in New York City, if you don't mind me asking?
Of the New York City NYC chapter, I'd say less than a couple of years.
It was a couple of years. So that's
Yeah.
cool. And what do you think distinguishes the New York chapter versus all the other chapters? I know we're all kind of proud about our stuff, so I'm just curious.
Yeah, I don't actually know a lot about other chapters. I know that there are people that come from far distances
Ooh.
to come to the New York City
Oh,
in-person meetings that we have once a month.
yeah.
So that tells me that there's value for those that are so far away, or maybe they don't have that kind of community in their local chapters. So
Well,
that's how I can gauge that there's, engaging, interactive experiences. So people come from far distances to be there.
I want to let you know your chapter won an award at Influence, right? So congratulations to your chapter. Let's turn our eyes to the future, right? Well, first off, what's in the future for Neelu? What's happening in the next couple of years, or what's on your list of things that you would love to happen in the next few years?
Yeah, so I'm working on new keynotes, and so I can't wait to uncover and unveil those.
Dun, dun,
Continue
dun.
speaking, think about book number two. So I'm really excited about all of the things to come.
Fantastic. Okay, so what do you think is the future of virtual and hybrid? Right? Yeah, I'm sure you do a little future pacing. I'm just curious, what do you think is going to happen, or what would you like to happen in virtual or hybrid?
I mean, honestly, I think it's going to be more of the same, and we have to, as speakers, make it better. So I think it's going to be where there are companies that don't want to pay speakers to come in person. And so they're going to say, let's do a virtual, and then the onus is on us. I think that trend is going to continue. I
Hmm.
think in terms of what I'm noticing is at the beginning of the pandemic, there were a lot more people that were willing to turn their cameras on and be sort of like there. And what I'm noticing now is that even if the sponsor is saying, please turn on your cameras, people don't want to turn on their cameras. So I'm noticing that there's sort of this like period of not wanting to turn on your cameras, which is why the speaker then has to figure out ways in terms of creating variety through their voice, through their performance that doesn't have to do with seeing their audience.
You'll love Neela. I don't know if you've ever seen my program. I have a program called Turn on the Damn Camera. That's the name of the program. Because the funny part is, like in the recursive joke, is that that's actually one of the worst ways to get people to turn on your cameras, to lean into your mic and yell at them and, come on, everybody, turn on your camera. It's so funny. Yeah, one of our goals inside of turning on cameras is, well, one is we don't, that's not even one of our goals. We want people to engage however they want to engage. And
Right.
camera is just one of like four or five, six different ways that they could really engage with people. And yeah, it's fun when you can get people to turn on your cameras. You never, ever, ever ask them to do it. So
Yeah.
yeah, so thank you for that. Yeah, I'll be curious to see. Oh, go ahead.
No, I would love to know what is your future pacing prediction of the
Oh.
virtual and hybrid world?
Well, I do think that some form of AR or VR is going to happen where keynoting, right? One day will start to feel like you are in person.
Mhm.
Or we have this. I have this what I call theory of bandwidth, which is like until bandwidth for the internet or whatever networking uh, matches the bandwidth for in person, right? It's always in person is always going to be better. I mean, you're also getting like senses, smells, all these other things that you're never going to get so far yet on the internet. But I do think the experience is going to get increased even more. You know what? I'm really surprised to see that, like, still in this flat world of Zoom, though, right? This video is so important because it's the difference between this and like having a black screen is that you can get so much more information from the body language of people. And so yeah, so I think those are some of the things. I think the second thing that I have predicted, Neelu, is that virtual allows you to use technology more and more to help you as a speaker or a facilitator. And wouldn't it be cool that there are actually ways that exist today too, but I'm not using them day to day, but some of them I am, is like the ability to judge your audience about how engaged they are, right? Even if they don't have their cameras on, but are they chatting with you? Are they doing something else, right? And it could actually give you a readback for that and help you, do things like maybe take a measurement of psychological safety and then saying, if you're not making it, what could you do? And then show you as a speaker that you actually did something, like you actually increased the level of engagement and other types of things like that. So I think all those tools are there now, and it would be curious to see which ones emerge and which ones really become used all the time in mainstream. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, when I was thinking of the question, I didn't think of AI as part of the
Ooh,
thing
yeah.
because it's like there's so many things that could happen. But I ultimately think the onus is always going to be on the speaker to make sure that people are engaged, and that is the number one priority and interested in your performance and your speech.
I love it. I have a good friend, Rick Altman, at the presentation summit, and one of his key points is like the number one thing in your presentation is you. It's not your slides. Come on, it's you. The
Right.
slides should only help, and if they're not helping, you should not use them,
Right.
right? And so it's a really genius part inside of that. Okay, speaking of you, I have a new feature on this podcast called the speed round. The speed round is I have developed some questions while talking to you, and you have to answer them as fast as possible if you'd like. Would you like to go and participate in the speed round?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, here we go. Favorite food?
Indian.
Oh, yeah, no brainer. Okay, best corporate maneuver or technique or tactic?
By whom?
By you, like for
Oh,
instance,
oh, I
like
see.
talking to a manager or something you do, like talking loud in a room. That's why I came up with this question.
Okay, my strategic would be interruption shields, words or phrases we use to jump back into conversation. These are part of our repertoire and we flex them like muscles for self-advocacy.
Whoa. Okay, what is one of your phrases then?
Can we circle back to, may I
Oh,
interject? I have a thought, I need to go back to that point, right? Like there's all of these ones based on who I'm speaking to. So if I'm in financial services, I might be more formal and say, may I? If
mhm.
I'm in tech, I'm just going to say, we need to jump back to that point before.
Oh, that's some gold, Neelu. I can't wait to see the rest of this list. Okay, the worst corporate technique or move.
Speaking loudly to get heard.
Oh wait, hold on a second. There we go. That's what I was looking for that. Okay, favorite author.
Favorite author, myself.
Wait, where's it? Okay, but favorite
No,
author.
seriously, I'll answer that one again. The Four Agreements.
Oh, that's a good one too.
Yes.
Yeah, I've read that. Okay, great. Favorite virtual tool.
Favorite virtual tool, chat.
Yeah. The number two engaging tool. My number one is the camera. Who is your cheerleader?
Who is my cheerleader?
Yeah.
My husband.
Oh. You want to give him a shout out? What's his name?
Yeah, Philip.
Oh, hey, Philip. All right, cool. Best tool for psychological safety.
Best tool for psychological safety is to build trust with the audience before asking them to do anything.
There we go. Best engagement tool anywhere.
Yes, trust.
Trust. Oh, good one. And besides yourself, your favorite virtual presenter or facilitator?
Jenny Sauer Klein.
Ooh. All right, Jenny, you too had just gotten a shout out here on the Engaging Virtual Meeting podcast. Oh my goodness. Neelu, thank you so much for joining here.
This is so fun.
If you could have a magic wand and get people to remember one thing from this podcast, what is that one thing?
Practice self-advocacy everywhere. So in your career and also at home. It's really important to do that.
Outstanding. Neelu, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for having a little advocacy for me, but more importantly, for you having self-advocacy for you. I can't wait to see you in the real world or on virtual somewhere around the world. Neelu, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right, this is John Chen, and you've just had another episode of the Engaging Virtual Meeting podcast with Neelu Kaur, who says, self-advocate all the time. And think about what's one easy way that you can self-advocate today. Let's see, what am I going to do to self-advocate? Oh, I'm having dinner with our speaker who's going to be at our NSA chapter tomorrow. And I got to tell you, the dinner sometimes is way more valuable than the presentations. You should think about that, when you can make social connections like that. Speaking of making a connection, subscribe, share, like, or comment here if you want to see more of these Engaging Virtual Meeting podcasts. If you want to get all of our podcasts, go to engagingvirtualmeetings.online and subscribe on one of your 13 favorite platforms. Did you know that Apple Podcasts is still the #1 platform for this podcast? And if you want to come join me, as well as 3 Hall of Fame speakers, and learn how to produce the most engaging conference you can, come to the Engaging Conference. You can get a free ticket at engagingvirtualmeetings.com/con, C-O-N, or find out how to get our paid VIP, or for the first time ever, in person. You asked for it, we're finally giving it to you. And last but not least, if you want to be like Neelu, click engagingvirtualmeetings.com/meet, select interview, and you too could be the next guest here on the Engaging Virtual Meetings podcast. Hey, we'll see you next time.
Always start people and keep